CalRecycle folks, can you turn on your webcams? And then Curie, can you stop sharing your screen really quick to do intros? Perfect. Well, it is 9 o'clock right now, so we're going to get started with this webinar. So thank you all for joining us and welcome to the statewide non-local entity webinar. My name is Ashley. I'm CalRecycle's SB 13A Communication Manager. Before I turn it over to Julia Doloff, who'll go over logistics of the webinar, I just want to introduce you all to who will be presenting and or available for questions. So from CalRecycle, just raise your hand and wave hi once I say your name. So from CalRecycle, we have Arlene Iwahiro and Kiri Canuella representing local assistants and non-local entities. And a big thank you to them as they're the ones who put together this PowerPoint and will be presenting on it. Kara Morgan and Julia Doloff representing assistants, collections, waivers, and basically almost everything with 1383. They have a little bit of knowledge on every little aspect. And a big thank you for Julia for handling the logistics of the webinar. It is a big deal to do the behind the scenes. We have Kyle Pogue, Tim Hall, Martine Boswell, and Alex Rosado representing edible food, Alan Osorio and Trisha Moore representing compliance and enforcement, and Ken King representing our waste characterization study. We also have Ray and Roberta who will help with our live Q&A portion. So big thank you to them for handling that once we get into the live Q&A. So now I'll turn it over to Julia to go over logistics. Everyone can turn off their cameras for now, and then we will see you guys shortly.
All right, thank you so much, Ashley. So good morning, everyone. So after Kiri and Arlene's presentation, we are going to have a Q&A session. So please use the instructions shown on the slide for that Q&A session. So if you're using the GoToWebinar platform and would like to ask a question, please type your question into the question pane. If you're watching the webinar via the CalEPA broadcast, please email your questions to the SLCP inbox. Staff from CalRecycle will unmute participants in the order that questions come in during the Q&A session. Note that you will need to unmute yourself on your end when asked to by a CalRecycle staff member. And please state your affiliation before asking your question. CalRecycle staff may respond to some questions in writing through the GoToWebinar. We will verbalize these written responses for everyone to hear. Questions and comments regarding the merit of the regulations were responded to during the rulemaking period. Therefore, today we will focus on questions or clarifications regarding implementation and tools. So now I will hand it over to Kiri and Arlene for their presentation.
Thank you, Julia. I am Arlene Iwahiro, and presenting with me today, as Ashley said, is Kiri Canuella. We are the Senior Tech Environmental Scientists at CalRecycle in the Local Assistance Market Development Branch, and posted on the screen is an overview of what we will be covering today. So before I go over the non-local entity and organic waste definitions, I want to point out a few things. Jurisdictions are required to provide education and outreach to all organic waste generators, including non-local entities located within the jurisdiction. Jurisdictions also need to determine if regulated businesses, including non-local entities, are subscribing to collection service or self-hauling. And this is what jurisdictions are currently doing under AB 341 and AB 1826 and will continue to do. Jurisdictions are to include in their capacity planning efforts all organic waste and edible food tonnage generated by commercial edible food generators. And jurisdictions are responsible for requiring haulers providing residential, commercial, or industrial organic waste collection services to generators within its boundaries to meet the requirements and standards of the regulations as a condition of approval of a contract, agreement, or other authorization to collect organic waste, which is in section 18988.1. So if a non-local entity is contracting with a hauler for its collection services, trash, recycling, or organics, then the hauler should be adhering to the regulatory requirements. Now let's look at the non-local entity definition. Non-local entities are an entity that is an organic waste generator, but is not subject to the control of a jurisdiction's regulations related to solid waste. These entities may include, but are limited to, special districts, federal facilities, prisons, facilities operated by the state park systems, public universities, including community colleges, county fairgrounds, and state agencies. I'm going to go over the different types of entities in the definition. First up is the special district. A special district, as a non-local entity, are special districts that do not provide solid waste collection services and also produce organic waste. I just want to point out that the jurisdiction definition includes special districts that provide solid waste collection services. These types of special districts have to adhere to any jurisdiction responsibilities in the regulations. Next is federal facilities, also as non-local entities. Some examples of federal facilities are federal office buildings, federal parks and campgrounds, and military bases. For non-local entities, we must make a paradigm shift of how state agencies were defined in AB 75. For AB 75, state agency means every state office, department, division, board, commission, or other agency of the state, including community colleges and the California state universities. UCs were not considered state agencies, but were encouraged to implement programs. So as you can see in the non-local entity definition, which is section 18982A42, entity types such as prisons, facilities operated by the state park systems, public universities, community colleges, and county fairgrounds are identified separately from state agencies. So even though these types of entities are what we consider state definitions under AB 75. So the reason why I'm making this distinction, and it's important for you to understand, is because parts of SB 1383 are specific to state agencies. So I want to be clear on what those are. This will come into play when we cover enforcement and mandated food donors. And in those cases, it's important that we know the differences between state agency and non-local entity. Also posted on the slide is the organic waste definition, and I'll just give you a second to read over that. Let's cover the requirements for,
So let's cover the requirements for non-local entities. Non-local entities must either subscribe to collection service or self-haul organic waste. This requirement ensures that non-local entities that generate organic waste are accountable for the organic waste that they generate and manage the organic waste material in compliance with the requirements. They could have a 3, 2, or single unsegregated collection service, and the service must comply with the requirements in Article 3. If they have a single unsegregated collection service or use a 2-container system, then the material in the gray container must go to a high diversion organic waste processing facility. If that facility does not meet performance requirements, then the non-local entity has options. For example, the facility comes into compliance, or the materials taken to another high diversion organic waste processing facility, or the non-local entity uses a 3-container collection service. Keep in mind that if they are subscribing to the jurisdiction's collection service, then the jurisdiction would be addressing this issue. If self-haul is practiced, it must be done in a manner that complies with the requirements of Article 7, Section 18988.3. If they self-haul part of their materials, they would need to subscribe to a service for the other organic waste materials. Second requirements, non-local entities need to provide containers for collection. Typically, the service provider will provide the external collection containers for trash, organics, and recycling, so the agency would focus on the internal containers. The internal container must have a body or lid that conforms with the container colors provided through the organic waste collection service provided by the jurisdiction, or must have container labels on new containers that comply with the labeling requirements in section 18984.8. Non-local entities are not required to replace functional containers, including containers purchased prior to January 1, 2022, that do not meet the requirements of this article prior to the end of the useful life of those containers or prior to January 1, 2036, whichever comes first. Non-local entities must ensure new containers are properly labeled by placing labels on containers that include language or graphic images or both that indicate the primary materials accepted and the primary materials prohibited in that container, or providing containers with imprinted text or graphic images that indicate the primary materials accepted and the primary materials prohibited in that container. Labels shall clearly indicate primary items that are prohibited container contaminants for each container, and non-local entities may comply by using the model labeling provided by the department. So to explain this further, here's an example. If the collection service is a 3-container system, then they need to have a green, blue, and gray internal container, or the 3 internal containers need to be labeled appropriately. The container color and material specifications are intended to standardize the colors and minimum levels of acceptable materials for collection containers provided across the state. This standardized approach helps employees, visitors, and contractors know what containers to use and ensure that the organic waste are transported to the appropriate facilities for recovery. It's important to point out that if a non-local entity does not generate any of the materials that would be collected in one type of container, then the entity does not have to provide that particular container in all areas where disposal containers are provided. Again, as part of the collection service, the hauler would be providing the external collection containers that meet the requirements in Article 3. A non-local entity should coordinate with its hauler regarding education. For example, if food waste is not currently being collected, then it would work with the hauler on implementing the program, such as education, monitoring for contamination, etc. Typically, the hauler will be doing the monitoring of external containers by conducting route reviews and providing education if there is contamination. You can confirm that your hauler is doing this. Next requirement, prohibits employees from placing organic waste in a container not designated for organic waste. Non-local entities are accountable for organic waste handled by their employees. This will help minimize contamination and ensure that the maximum amount of organic waste is recovered from non-local entities. Next requirement, non-local entities must periodically inspect organic waste containers for contamination, and if the containers are contaminated, inform employees of the requirements to only use those containers for organic waste. It is important to ensure that employees are not putting organic waste in the trash container and are not contaminating the recycling and organics container. This ensures that non-local entities are accountable for their organic waste by maintaining awareness of the contents of the organic waste collection container, communicating to employees when containers are contaminated, and when needed, educating employees about the proper use of organic waste container. Last requirement on this slide, non-local entities must provide information to employees on methods for the prevention of organic waste generation. Also, nothing prohibits a non-local entity from preventing waste generation, managing organic waste on site, or using a community composting site. These are additional options available to prevent the creation of, as well as to recycle organic waste beyond subscribing to an organic waste collection service or self-hauling to a facility that processes the organic waste for recycling.
CalRecycle can issue a waiver if a non-local entity provides documentation that any of the following apply. A waiver for collection service can be issued if a non-local entity generates a de minimis amount of material in the blue and/or green container. De minimis amounts of waste are either of the following. Solid waste is 2 cubic yards or more, and organic waste is less than 20 gallons per week. Solid waste is less than 2 cubic yards, and organic waste is less than 10 gallons per week. So for example, in a 3-container collection service, if there is no organic waste stream present, material that would go into the green container, then a green container collection service is not necessary. However, a blue container collection service would still be needed to provide collection of other organic waste, such as paper products and cardboard. If there is a de minimis waiver for collection, then the associated internal container would not be necessary. In the example above, if you have no material for the green container, such as an office building that does not generate food or green waste, then the office building would not need to have internal containers for food. Next, a space waiver may be granted for a non-local entity if it provides documentation that a hauler, licensed architect, licensed engineer, or similarly qualified entity has determined there's inadequate space for separate organic waste containers. This waiver is only applicable in limited scenarios and should decrease in use over the years. There are a few circumstances in which existing waste collection space could not accommodate an additional organic waste recycling container if the existing containers were downsized. And third, if a jurisdiction that is a non-local entity is located in, if a jurisdiction that a non-local entity is located in is granted a waiver pursuant to section 18984.12, then the non-local entity will not have to comply with the requirements in Article 5. The non-local entity will need to submit a request to CalRecycle. This was done because if a jurisdiction in these areas do not have to comply with Article 3, then there will not be a collection service available for non-local entities to utilize. CalRecycle will be publishing on its website the jurisdiction and census tracts for unincorporated areas that meet the thresholds for a waiver. This will be published after the 2020 census data is available. Non-local entities will be able to review this information to determine if they are in a jurisdiction or census tract that is waived. We will also have guidance on our website for non-local entities to request a waiver. As I mentioned earlier, it should be available in the May or June timeframe, and we will hold a statewide webinar to explain the process.
So now let's discuss the edible food recovery requirements. So what does edible food mean? It means food intended for human consumption. We also specify in the regulations that nothing requires that edible food be recovered if it does not meet the food safety requirements of the California Retail Food Code. So just because the food is intended for human consumption does not mean it is safe to recover. It must be intended for human consumption and also meet all of the food safety requirements that are specified in California's Retail Food Code. We also specified in the definition of edible food that it is not solid waste if it is recovered and not discarded. This is really important. This is material that is before the trash container. This is food and not waste. The photos on the left were taken from one of CalRecycle's Waste Prevention and Rescue Grant recipients. These are some of the recoveries that are happening in K-12 schools and school kitchens. So showing a contrast, the food pictured on the right is from an unsupervised open buffet line where customers serve themselves. Most county health departments would not allow that food to be donated.
There are two tiers for mandated food owners, which are also known as commercial edible food generators. Tier 1 mandated food owners begin implementation January 1st, 2022. Tier 2 mandated food donors begin implementation January 1, 2024. So when looking at non-local entities to assess if they are subject to the edible food requirements, we must first determine if they fit into either Tier 1 or 2 definitions. We're not aware of any situations where a non-local entity would fit in the Tier 1 definition. I'm going to go over and focus on these specific types of non-local entities as mandated food donors: state agencies, prisons, facilities operated by the state park systems, public universities, including community colleges, and fairgrounds. So for state agencies that are not identified separately in the non-local entity definition, the state agency is a Tier 2 generator if they have a cafeteria with 250 seats or more, a total cafeteria facility size equal to or greater than 5,000 square feet. Some examples are CalPERS, CalSTRS, the Franchise Tax Board, or the National Guard. While there is a specific definition for state agency as a mandated food donor, a state agency may also meet the definitions of a restaurant, hotel, health facility, large venue, or event. For example, a state hospital may not have a cafeteria that meets the state agency Tier 2 definition, but it meets the health facility definition. Now let's look at how prisons, facilities operated by the state park system, public universities, including community colleges and county fairgrounds, might fit into one of the Tier 2 definitions. First off is restaurants with 250 seats or more, or a total facility size equal to or greater than 5,000 square feet. These would be restaurants that meet the definition and is located in a state park or a public university if the restaurant is owned by the non-local entity. An example of this is Crocker Dining Hall at Asilomar State Beach. If a restaurant meets the threshold and is not owned by a non-local entity it is located in, then it is the restaurant that is required to comply. If a non-local entity is operating on property they do not own, they are subject to the mandated food donor requirements. An example of this would be a state park operating a concession stand or museum on federal property. Next is a hotel. So a hotel is one with an on-site food facility and 200 rooms or more. We aren't aware of any state agencies or non-local entities that meet this definition. Other Tier 2 generators are a health facility with an on-site food facility and 100 beds or more. Some example of this could be the California Medical Facility or Salinas Valley State Prison. A large venue means a permanent venue facility that annually seats or serves an average of more than 2,000 individuals within the grounds of the facility per day of operation of the venue facility. A venue facility includes, but is not limited to, a public, nonprofit, privately owned or operated stadium, amphitheater, arena, hall, amusement park, conference or civic center, zoo, aquarium, airport, racetrack, horse track, performing arts center, fairgrounds, museum, theater, or other public attraction facility. A facility or site owned by one entity that includes individual businesses located on the site is considered a single large venue. Some examples are CalExpo, the Mondavi Performing Arts Center, public university stadiums that meet the large venue threshold. And large event means an event including, but not limited to, a sporting event or a flea market that charges admission price or is operated by a local agency and serves an average of more than 2,000 individuals per day of operation of the event at a location that includes, but is not limited to, a public, nonprofit, or privately owned park, parking lot, golf course, street system, or other open space when being used for an event. An example of a large event would be the state fair. Just a couple things I want to note. If a prison that has a food service provider, if they have a food service provider, then the food service provider is Tier 1, not the prison. Federal facilities are not subject to SB 1383 mandated food donor requirements. Also, a non-local entity is allowed to recover edible food and provide to its employees and students For example, many public universities have edible food collection and then redistribute edible food to students.
The key requirements for commercial edible food generators is to arrange to have the maximum amount of their edible food that would otherwise be disposed be recovered for human consumption through a contract or written agreement, either with a food recovery organization or service that will collect their surplus edible food, or self-haul to a food recovery organization that will accept their edible food. So let's talk about self-haul. We added this into the regulations based upon feedback from the California Association of Food Banks. It is very expensive for the organizations and services to recover this edible food. They are often dependent on philanthropic or government funding and grants, and many do not have sustainable funding. So it would help them if generators are self-hauling. However, the self-hauling has to be included in the contract or written agreement. Under no circumstances should a commercial edible food generator self-haul edible food without permission from their food recovery organization or service. This is absolutely critical to protect them from donation dumping. There is also nothing in the regulation that prohibits a food recovery organization or service from charging a fee for the services that they're providing to the food donor. There are record-keeping requirements for mandated food donors and no reporting requirements. Mandated food donors records must be kept up regularly and must be maintained for 5 years. Records may be kept electronically or hard copy. These requirements include keeping the following: a list of each food recovery service or organization that collects or receives its edible food pursuant to a contract or written agreement established under Section 18991.3b. A copy of contracts or written agreements between the mandated food donor and a food recovery service or organization, and a record of the following for each of the food recovery organization or service that the mandated food donor has a contract or written agreement with: the name, address, and contact information of the service or organization, the types of food that will be collected by or self-hauled to the service or organization, the established frequency that the food will be collected or self-hauled, and the quantity of food collected or self-hauled to a service or organization for food recovery. The quantity shall be measured in pounds recovered per month. To help mandated food donors to comply, CalRecycle with HF&H Consultants developed a model food recovery agreement. The tool is highly customizable, and it is intended to help mandated food donors to comply. The requirements are silent on what needs to be included in the contract or written agreement. So although we provide this as a model and it is customizable, it does not have to be used, but it can be used. Non-local entities can check with the food recovery organization or services that they partner with to see if they already have a written agreement or contract that is provided to donors. If they do not, then the non-local entity that is a mandated food donor will need to have a written agreement or contract and keep it in their records.
Under the SB 1383 regulations, jurisdictions are not required to enforce non-local entities. CalRecycle will conduct enforcement for non-local entities related to organic waste. Enforcement applies to organic waste recycling and mandated food donor requirements, except for federal facilities, which are not subject to the mandated food donor requirements. The enforcement process is a progressive process that consists of the following: issuance of a notice of violation that can include additional time. If the issue is not corrected, the entity is placed on the organic waste recovery non-compliance inventory list on CalRecycle's website. If an entity is placed on the inventory list, they come off of the list when they correct the deficiency. If the department finds that a state agency or federal facility has failed to meet the deadline for a non-notice violation issued, the department shall send a notice stating that the department has placed the respondent on the organic waste recovery non-compliance inventory listed on its website. The department may remove the respondent from the organic waste recovery non-compliance inventory upon a finding based on available evidence that the respondent is no longer in violation. While the regulations become effective January 1st, 2022, the enforcement process is an escalating process and the timelines are not triggered until a notice of violation is issued. CalRecycle will consider the totality of circumstances surrounding non-local entities' compliance prior to issuing a notice of violation. Once CalRecycle determines a non-local entity is violating Article 5 or Article 10, and enforcement action is necessary. CalRecycle will implement the process outlined in the SB 1383 regulations. The SB 1383 enforcement structure allows CalRecycle to focus on compliance assistance first and dedicate enforcement efforts to serious offenders. Regulations allow for flexibility and deadline extensions in some circumstances when there are extenuating circumstances causing compliance issues.
For resources, visit our website that outlines the requirements for SB 1383. The webpage for non-local entities is not yet published, but is coming soon. CalRecycle developed the SB 1383 compliant model labels, signage, brochures for non-local entities to utilize. This information is available on our website. The new signage is available for 3, 2, and single unsegregated collection services in English, Mandarin, Spanish, Punjabi, Russian, and Korean. The materials are designed to include the most widely acceptable and prohibited items. Each sign is fully customizable using Adobe Acrobat Pro. Users can add and delete the materials they collect in their program. To stay up to date, you can sign up for the SLCP listserv. If you need future assistance, we encourage you to work with your local jurisdiction, or you can contact the local assistance liaison that is assigned to the jurisdiction that your non-local entity is located in. The webpage to access or find your contact is listed on this slide. So before we turn to audience questions, we wanted to share a brief update about CalRecycle's commercial generator-based edible food waste characterization study. I will turn it over to the study project manager to give you some more information.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. CalRecycle's commercial generator-based edible food waste characterization study is currently underway. Our study will help us track progress towards targets established by 1383 to achieve reductions in the level of the statewide disposal of organic waste with the special requirements for edible food waste reduction. Our contractor is beginning to recruit businesses and selected industry groups to participate in this study. Participation involves filling out a survey on their waste management practices and allowing a sampling team to take a sample from their trash and organics bin of at least 200 pounds, as well as a peek into the recycling bin to visually assess if there is any food waste. The team will be sorting the samples into 11 categories, 8 food categories, 3 non-food categories, and participating businesses may receive a composition summary of what was in their trash and organic samples. Some of the industry groups we expect to be more difficult to recruit are listed above. If you have any recommendations on businesses that fall within one of these groups and may be interested in participating in and getting a composition report of their organics and trash bin, please let us know. And you can email us at wastechar@calrecycle.ca.gov, and that's waste, C-H-A-R. Thank you for your time.
All right, so thank you everyone for your presentation. So this is just a quick reminder to please use the instructions shown on the slide for the Q&A session. Again, to ask a question via the GoToWebinar platform, just type your question into the question pane. As a reminder, we will ask you, even if your question has been responded to in writing already, to read your question out loud, and we will repeat the response out loud for those that are watching via the CalEPA broadcast, as they cannot see those written responses. So just want to remind everyone of that. Staff will unmute participants in the order that questions come in. Again, you must unmute yourself on your end when asked to by CalRecycle staff. So with that, I will start us off with our first question, which came in through the slcp.organics inbox. That question is from Mark Rappaport with the City of Folsom. Mark asks, is it the jurisdiction's responsibility to verify compliance by non-local entities?
Alan, did you want to start? Or Tricia?
I'm sorry, Carol, I wasn't on the first one. So I didn't hear the question.
Do you mind repeating it, Julia?
Absolutely. So Mark Rappaport from the City of Folsom asked, is it the jurisdiction's responsibility to verify compliance by non-local entities?
I'm not sure, Carol, on that one. How about you, Alan? I know that we have to do the enforcement on them, so I'm not sure how far a jurisdiction could take that with inspecting them.
Yeah, I could add to that. So regarding the enforcement of that, of the actual non-local entities, CalRecycle will be, has a process and will be going through the enforcement actions upon the non-local entities, and that's built into the regulations. As far as the inspections go, I'm a little gray in that area. Kara, if you want to chime in on that, with that regard in regards to the inspection and maintaining that and performing those inspections on a regular basis.
Sure. And it will help. I'll probably ask for some clarification. So I don't know if we can unmute.
I'll take a look and see if he is in GoToWebinar.
Perfect. So just to start, so ultimate inspections and enforcement will be done by CalRecycle, particularly for organic waste recycling. With that said, however, there is currently in AB 341 and AB 1826, the what we call in 1383 world, the desk audit. So it is, you are still responsible for confirming if a non-local entity, such as a state agency, for example, is subscribing to service or not, and including that in your monitoring. However, when it comes to conducting a compliance evaluation at that non-local entity or conducting follow-up enforcement actions, it will be CalRecycle that takes that action. When it comes to edible food, depending on the kind of circumstance, right now, many jurisdictions, and depending on the type of state agency, conduct food inspections at edible food, or excuse me, at commercial businesses. So it may be that your health inspector is also already going out to a particular state agency. So I think in that respect, we would be collaborating, but again, primary inspection and enforcement falls under CalRecycle's authority. Each jurisdiction is also required to provide education outreach to all of its organic waste generators, and that would include any non-local entity. So let me know if that clarified and answered your questions.
Yeah, and thanks, Kara. There was a couple of things in there with 1383. We're talking about previous mandates and what that respect. So I think you tied it in. We're looking at the holistic approach of things with the other mandated laws of the non-local entities as well. So.
Bet.
All right, so I'll move on to the next question. Our next question is from Neil Shapiro. Neil, if you could ask your first question about organics recycling if the jurisdiction is not involved in collection. You're self-muted, by the way.
Hi there. You can hear me? Great. Hi, Cara. Yeah, I'm just curious, how does the jurisdiction get the tonnage weight information from non-local entities for the annual report, or is it reported to the state and then it works its way back to us? Just want to make sure we're set up to get that information if we have to report it. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Neil. I appreciate that. Are you speaking with respect to organic waste or edible food?
The organic waste.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying. So jurisdictions are not required to report on tonnage from any organic waste generator. So in the scenario that you're presenting, you wouldn't need to be tracking that information. Does that help?
Yep. Yes. Thanks. So
Perfect.
yeah, any non-local entity organic generator where we don't have to worry about the weight.
That's correct. Yeah. What you're after is ensuring or monitoring that they're either subscribing to service or managing it in some other fashion. So just like what you're doing now under 1826 and 341.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, this next question is from Leticia Garcia. You are now unmuted from our end. If you could just go ahead and unmute yourself, state your affiliation, and repeat your question, we'll go ahead and get that answered for you.
The code section, what was the code section for the record keeping requirements for the food donors? I'm with the California Grocers Association.
Martine, did you want to answer that?
Sure. Thanks so much for your question and thanks for tuning in. The regulatory section is section 18991.4, and those are the record keeping requirements for commercial edible food generators. Or I'm sorry, those are the record, for commercial edible food generators, also known as mandated food donors.
Okay, thank you.
And our next question is from James Rowland. James, can you ask your first question about non-local entities subscribing or composting on site? And if you could please state your affiliation as well. You are self-muted. Okay, I'll go ahead and ask James's question. Non-local entities can subscribe or self-haul organic waste. What if they compost on site?
Thanks for that question, James. I really appreciate it. So I did put a response in the chat, and I'll share that out with everyone. It kind of depends. So a non-local entity is allowed to receive a waiver, what we call de minimis waiver, if it meets the threshold requirements. So your question didn't give me all the information that I need to answer your question. However, to provide just a scenario response, if a non-local entity was managing all of its organic waste that would go in the green container and was below the thresholds of, if they're over 4 cubic yards, less than 20 gallons per week, that would go in the green container. If they're less than 2 cubic yards per week of trash, recycling, and organics, and they have less than 10 gallons that would go in the green container, they can be waived from the green container collection service. But if you're only managing a portion of, say, your food waste and landscaping waste, and you have other material that would go in the green container that's over that threshold, then you would not be able to be waived from the collection service. So if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to put that into the Q&A, or we can also do a follow-up to discuss more specifics about your particular situation. Thanks.
Next question is from Jennifer Claiborne. You are now unmuted from our end. You could just go ahead and state your affiliation and repeat your question.
Good morning, everyone. Jennifer Claiborne, Sacramento County. As you may know, being in Sacramento, we have a lot of state agencies, a lot of buildings. And my question was about waivers. I know you had answered timelines for waivers, low population, low elevation, or excuse me, high elevation. However, my specific question was more in regards to de minimis waivers. So for the state agencies, how long do you intend to allow those de minimis waivers? I know there's a requirement for every 5-year inspection, but I wasn't sure if that tied to the length of those de minimis waivers. We'd like to be consistent with our other businesses for our haulers' sake.
Alan, did you want to start? And this is laid out, Jennifer, just so you know, in Article 14.
Thank you.
And sorry, I missed that point. Even as I was responding, I was like, I wonder if she's asking about de minimis and physical.
It's all good. I could have been clearer.
Alan, did you want to?
Yeah, sorry, Karen. Go ahead. You could start, and then I could add to it.
Sure. So the time frame is very similar. It's 5 years, Jennifer. Certainly, if there was a situation during that 5-year period where something changed, you do have the ability to remove that waiver. But it is intended every 5 years that you would go back and inspect, determine if de minimis is still needed. Physical space, we have communicated to folks that, while you could grant a physical space waiver for 5 years, we do intend for physical space waivers to be something that hopefully can be corrected sooner, whether that's an enclosure issue or some other type of space issue. Jennifer, does that help answer your question?
Yes, it does. And I'm sure she mentioned this, so I apologize for probably being repetitive. But then the issuance of waivers, is that done by CalRecycle?
It is. For non-local entities and local education agencies, we will be issuing those waivers. And we have some forms that we're developing that the process for jurisdiction issued waivers is your process. But for us, we'll be developing a process for non-local entities and local education agencies. Also, if you ever had a question, I think it'll be important that we share that information with jurisdictions so you know which of your non-local entities and local education agencies have any type of waiver. So we do hope to publish information on our website as well.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
You bet.
Thanks, Kara.
Our next question is from Heidi Oriel. Heidi, you are self-muted. If you could unmute and state your affiliation and ask your question.
Hi there, I'm Heidi Oriel with the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District. We provide wastewater treatment in the Sacramento area. And my question is regarding the requirement to divert organic waste to a recovery facility. In looking at the SB 1383 regs, I didn't find a definition of recovery facility. So I was wondering if that was defined elsewhere or how suitable recovery facilities are defined for diversion of organic waste. And I'm thinking about the range, everything from the green waste to food waste to also biosolids that are produced by our wastewater treatment plant.
Ashley, are you, because I don't think we have anyone on from SWIFT, but do you want to help tag team with me on this one? So Heidi, thanks so much for your question. I really appreciate it. The main focus for knowing what type of facility is if you have what we call single unsegregated collection service and you have to take your material to a high diversion organic waste processing facility. For those facilities, CalRecycle in early 2023 will be publishing a list of those facilities that meet those requirements. Otherwise, the regulations provide the types of recovery activities that material can go to. So I think for you, for example, being wastewater treatment plant, if you were, say, land applying biosolids that have been processed, the regulations in Article 2 have requirements on what has to be met. Also, when it comes to procurement requirements, and then we also have a section in the regulations that are specific to POTWs. Ashley, is there something else you'd like to add to that?
I think you really hit the nail on the head on that one. Also, Heidi, in Article 2, there is something that determines new technology. So if you guys are working, I don't know if you're working on something that's not identified in Article 2 of what is considered a recovery activity or process or technology for 1383, but we do have not so much flexibility, but we do have a process for new technologies as well, because we understand, as the years go on, new technology is going to be created, it's going to become more efficient. So we also do have that in the regulations. And if that doesn't help, Heidi, we can always connect you with our facilities team. I don't have them on the call today, but happy to take this offline as well if we didn't fully answer your question.
Okay, that'd be helpful. I will follow up. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, next question is from James Rowland. If we still have them on the line, please go ahead and ask your question regarding campgrounds at federally managed national forests. And you are self-muted, James.
Hey, James, I'm hoping you can help clarify the question that you're asking. If you're able to unmute.
Yeah. If not, we can just go ahead and go straight to Caitlin. Asking a question about food service providers that operate federal facilities, tier 1 or tier 2.
This is Caitlin from the County of San Diego. We have, a good deal of federal facilities down here, and I understand that it's not on the federal facility themselves to be designated as tier 1 or tier 2, but if there's food service providers operating in the federal facilities, we're not sure how we're supposed to, walk up to Camp Pendleton and conduct an inspection. So any guidance on that would be appreciated. And also just to note that, CalRecycle keeps touting that we can collaborate with our health departments, and we've asked around and it doesn't seem like most jurisdictions have been able to do that, not for a lack of trying. So, any other responses would be appreciated with that.
Sure. Caitlin, I'll tag team with Martine as she comes on. So one thing I did want to mention to you is that when it comes to inspecting food service providers, it's where that food service provider is, its operation is located. So the fact that a food service provider may be going onto the federal base, providing that food service, the inspection wouldn't happen at that location. It's where that food service provider is located. And that's where you're looking at their records and if they are recovering the maximum amount of edible food. Martine, do you want to add on with respect to your response on food service providers?
Yeah, so I think that pretty much covered it. Just recognizing that it's the food service provider that's ultimately responsible for compliance, not that federal facility. And then also inspections can be requesting to see their records. So if you're not able to get to the federal base, you can ask to see their records of their activities at that site.
Yeah, and then Caitlin, I appreciate the challenges that a number of jurisdictions are having. Particularly, what we're hearing is that in some counties, environmental health, due to COVID, it's been just quite overwhelmed, and they are, in some cases, not willing to take on this added piece, even though to us, maybe it's not a significant piece, to them, it's just additional time. So we do have some counties that are working to collaborate. Some are not necessarily able to come online in the first year. So they're looking at once COVID kind of things get back to normal, then they will be looking at collaborating. We also have some jurisdictions that have been successful in collaborating with environmental health. So, and then we have jurisdictions that have not been successful. So, if you are not able to work with the county and the County Department of Health to create that collaboration, then you have to look at other ways that you're going to conduct the inspections. Some jurisdictions are looking at utilizing their code enforcement officers that go out to these types of businesses. Some jurisdictions are using, if they're part of a JPA, they're using JPA staff. So they're looking at it in a variety of ways. The other thing we'd like to point out, as Martine presented in the statewide regional webinar, that the inspections of every commercial edible food generator does not have to happen every year. You can prioritize your inspections, and this is also communicated and laid out in Article 14 as far as prioritizing. Caitlin, does that help?
Yeah, it helps somewhat. I guess if the requirement then is for, for these food service providers, It sounds like it's just potentially an office audit then if they have, a headquarters in a particular jurisdiction. I guess I'm failing to see why that inspection would have to happen on site then if it's just a record review.
I appreciate that comment. So I think there are two things. First, as we've laid out in Article 14, an inspection is required to be conducted on site. And we've talked about this also in our statewide webinars. And that inspection for a commercial edible food facility is looking at that they have an agreement or agreements with the Edible Food Recovery Organization or services, looking at their records to determine, assess that they are recovering the max amount of edible food. And finally, lastly, it's about providing education and having that interaction with the business. So I do hear you. However, the regulations are set up for these inspections to be conducted on site. Kyle, would you like to add? Kyle, I think you're on mute or something's on mute. Oh, can't hear you. So
well, thanks for the response, Kara. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do more work in San Diego County, and if I can be involved or our team be involved in any, collaboration, we're happy to do so. We also have an upcoming meeting with what we call CCDH, which is the Association Local Enforcement Agencies and Environmental Health. We're hopeful that some of those conversations will be helpful in clarifying some of the concerns that environmental health might have in helping with conducting these inspections. So my fingers are crossed for future collaboration. Thanks, Caitlin.
All right, and Kara, to clarify on James's question, yes, organic waste, not edible food waste at federally managed national forests.
Thanks, James. So, for that one, the entity that's managing the campground is the business or commercial organic generator. So I'm not exactly sure if it's a private entity that's operating on the federal grounds or not, but it would be that entity that needs to set up the collection service. You certainly, when you're in a campground, right, it's, a lot of people, they're generating waste. So it is important that appropriate containers are there to collect any of the organic waste materials. It is not necessary, say, out on the trails or in these kind of out trails, I guess, to have collection containers out there. So I hope that helps answer the question, but we'd be happy to do a follow-up if you have a specific scenario and if our team can learn more about that particular campground in that scenario, and also if we can provide any communication to the entity that's running that campground so that they're aware of any requirements. I hope that helps.
All right, jumping into a question from David McGrew. You are now unmuted from our end. Please state your affiliation and repeat your question regarding a dining hall at one of the state universities.
Hi, I'm the Assistant Director of Facilities at the Student Union at San Diego State University. We are an auxiliary to the campus. We aren't actually the campus, we're a nonprofit organization. And we have a little over 4,000 square foot cafe dining hall. And the seating capacity is 265 max. We have restaurants that are not owned by us. They operate out of our facility. And ultimately, all of the waste generated in there for us is all post-consumer waste. So I'm trying to find out where we fit in this, if we fit in it at all, and also how should we divert that waste? In San Diego, it's kind of a challenge at this time for organics, unless they're pre-consumer. So any help would be great.
David, thanks for your question. I would really love it if we could set up a follow-up with you, because it sounds like we need to, one, have a conversation that includes the local jurisdiction staff to talk about what options are available locally. When it comes to edible food, with the definition of a restaurant, it is if you meet 250 seats, you're in. If you meet 5,000 square feet, you're in. So if you meet either of those thresholds, you are considered a restaurant under the definition. So if I think initially you'd said you're below 5,000 square feet, but you also mentioned you have more than 250 seats. So it's that 250 seat piece that would make meet the definition of a restaurant. We'd love to have a follow-up with you to better understand kind of what the facility is and how it operates and what's going on. If there is, you mentioned that I think you mentioned maybe that there's not any edible food that's generated. So again, if you meet the definition, there is a responsibility to recover the maximum amount of edible food. So I suppose if there was absolutely no edible food generated, then there wouldn't be any to recover. But we can talk more offline about your particular situation. Certainly when it comes to recovering the organic waste, again, and I'm not sure how the auxiliary works and how your trash service is set up, but it will be necessary to have organic waste collection service. And that's going to depend on the type of service you have, if it's a 3-container, 2-container, or single container type of system. So if you provide your contact information, our team will be glad to set up a follow-up meeting with you. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, that's very helpful. How would you like me to provide my contact information?
You could just throw it into the Q&A.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So this wraps up the non-local entity webinar. We have a lot of questions left over. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull them off of the webinar and we're going to be responding to you guys either through email or a phone call. So we will be getting back to you guys. This PowerPoint will also be posted on our website, including the talking points once we make it ADA compliant. So please sign up for our SLCP listserv, as that's where we'll announce that it has been posted. And so thank you guys for this wonderful webinar. Lots of great questions. We'll be looking at these questions, potentially creating Q&A off of those, also to be posted on our website. So again, sign up for the SLC listserv. Thank you guys so much and have a great